Loading. Welcome to Access the Animus.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new video here on Access the Animus. In this video we're going to take a look at all the new rumors and leaks about the upcoming Siege of Paris DLC and the next and upcoming mythological expansion of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, thanks to a number of sources and YouTube channels. So spoiler alert in case you don't want to ruin the surprise for yourself, even if what we're going to show you today isn't necessarily bound to eventually end up in the game anyway. We're going to have a look at the new Siege of Paris leaks, including some videos of the abilities that will be made available in the DLC, the close-ups of some of the characters that might end up in the expansion, and the showcase of the Paladin and Reaper Set, before moving on to the next mythological expansion that was teased at the recent Ubisoft Forward event, for which YouTuber Jonathan was able to find a lot of information about Odin and the abilities he might be able to use in that DLC. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it, subscribing to our channel and turning the notifications on so you won't miss any of our future updates. And with that out of the way, let's dive into all the recent rumors and leaks about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Let's start with Siege of Paris, and apparently in the recent days the videos for the abilities that might end up in the expansion and those of their upgrades have been found by user Ghost Leader BG. This was reported by user El Fantasma de Cosmos on Twitter, who shared the videos found by Ghost Leader, so we're now able to show them to you, so once again, spoiler alert here. As we know from the Ubisoft Forward presentation and from one of Andy Reload's videos, the first ability, called Golden Flame, will allow Eivor to attach an explosive to an enemy, which will later detonate, while the upgrade of this ability will actually allow Eivor to push the enemy towards other guards so that the explosive can hit them too. The second one, supposedly called Ghoul Breath, will cause an arrow to be laced with poison that will cause the target to become ill and then die, and apparently to scare the surrounding enemies, while its upgrade will cause a cloud of poison to hit more enemies, while the surrounding guards will still be scared away. The third ability is the now overly known Plague of Rats, which will allow players to be able to throw an arrow that will attract a swarm of rats that will kill enemies standing within the area. The upgrade of Plague of Rats instead will cause the rats to move from one enemy to another, in an even deeper reference to the game A Plague Tale. Next we have some additional pre-rendered but also audio-less cutscenes from the Siege of Paris DLC that were found among the game files by Reddit user Chadlake, and that apparently will be part of some kind of tutorial. Once again, spoiler alert here, as these seem to involve some new characters that we haven't heard about yet, at least up until now, along with an actual tutorial that involves a specific mechanic in the DLC. So in the first video we see a man in an underground location with some tattoos around his eyes and with a specific pendant, who seems to be a leader of some kind of group and again seems to be talking to some of his henchmen. Then we have what seems to be an abbess, or a female religious leader anyway, with two nuns behind her, and we see them praying, likely to double down on this being a religious character. Then we have a kind of a religious military leader who is wielding a huge cross-shaped staff while several other soldiers are amassing behind him, some of which are wearing shields with cross textures over them, again to show how religious Francia was at the time. This does seem to be a suitable character for a boss fight, by the way. And finally we have this other noble or leader who seems to also be in charge of several soldiers and might or might not be one of the three nobles that have to be defeated as part of one of the achievements. Lastly, we have a fifth video, but as we said earlier, it's not about characters. Instead, it's about a mechanic that involves rats, and that is once again a reference to A Plague Tale. In fact, the first part of the video shows how Eivor will find rats in the map even without conjuring them through the Plague of Rats ability, and sometimes she will have to get rid of them by driving them into the sewer covers and then covering them to avoid them from getting back. The second part of the tutorial video shows how Eivor and the player can reverse that mechanic by breaking the sewer covers and allowing the rats to come out and kill the guards, once again in a very similar way to what happened in A Plague Tale. Moreover, as mentioned earlier, many YouTubers were able to find ways to show gameplay about the Paladin and Reaper equipment sets that will be obtainable in the Siege of Paris expansion. As usual, Andy Reloads and his pal Petter have been hard at work showing the Paladin set, which we can see both in its hooded version and with its headgear, which is pretty similar to that of the other Frankish soldiers, while the set itself will be based around the consuming stamina in exchange for dealing more damage, and that is reflected in the perks of its various pieces. We can also see some visual upgrades to the various pieces of the set, as shown by Pyrite. Andy also showed some additional rewards that are seemingly linked to the Paladin set, like the bear, potentially called Ursa Major, that should be made available through the DLC, and the raven skin called Rebel Raven, which might be tied to the Rebel mission in the DLC, and even some Paladin tattoos that are likely to be found in the DLC map. Along with this, Andy and Petter were able to finally get the multicolored Joyeuse one-handed sword in-game, and it was indeed the one shown in the presentation at Ubisoft Forward. And both historically and in lore, it will be the legendary sword of Charlemagne, that was made out of the same metal of Roland's Durendal, another sword that will be made available in the DLC. As we mentioned in our previous videos, Roland was a famous Frankish military leader that went on to become a hero of the Frankish and French literature, and his sword, the Durendal, will indeed end up in the game. And by showing the two swords, Andy and Petter did give a glimpse of some dual one-handed swords gameplay, which will allow players for some interesting combos, as you can see. Next we have the Reaper set, that is the most assassiny of the ones available in the DLC, and again Andy Reloads and VJest Gaming showed both the looks of the set with its hooded and headgear version, and of course some gameplay as well. Andy also showed the perks of the set, which, as we mentioned in our previous video, will restore health after a successful assassination, and when wearing the full set, it will actually cause time to slow down further when spotted by an enemy, and this is probably a perk that will be useful for the stealth players that haven't always been happy with the stealth system of the game. As for the Paladin set, Pyrite did show the upgrades to some of the pieces of the set, and interestingly enough, the Reaper mask, when fully upgraded, would actually turn into a Reaper helm, which Andy also showed through some pictures, which will surely look nice and scary even combined with other sets. Along with this, Andy and Petter were able to finally find some of the scythes that will be made available through the DLC, and will play into the fantasy of dressing with the Reaper set and wielding the scythes like the Grim Reaper. So they did show the Bloodied Scythe and the Scythe of Tribulation, and as you can see, scythes will behave as heavy weapons similarly to heavy axes, so you have to use them properly to avoid being hit by enemies. In this case, for example, Andy showed some dual scythe gameplay, which seems pretty effective considering the range that these weapons have, especially against standard soldiers. Moving on, we have some more rumors and leaks about the third expansion for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is thought to be released at the start of 2022 and to take place in one or more mythological environments, the most rumored being Svartalfheim, in which will have Odin as protagonist, as confirmed during the latest Ubisoft Forward presentation. Now recently, YouTuber Jonathan shared a video where he went through all the abilities or better powers that Odin might seemingly possess in the expansion, even showing some early concepts, or shall we call them placeholders. And of course, this is from the game files, and the expansion is a long way before being released, so what we're going to show you isn't necessarily going to end up in the DLC, but nonetheless, it is currently in the game files. So the first powers found by Jonathan were the fire and ice infusions. Now what he found are only the names of these powers, so we don't know for sure how they might work, but based on the pictures, as mentioned by Jonathan, we can imagine that they might imbue weapons with fire and ice properties. So yeah, within the Mythology DLC, after the fire and poison statuses, we might finally get the ice one as well. Next we have the Jotun Glamour and the Muspel Glamour powers, and as of now it's not clear what they might be about, but based on the placeholder pictures, these powers might change and shape Odin's visuals and maybe his interaction with the world, with some fire-like effects for the Muspel Glamour and some kind of ice cape or cloak for the Jotun Glamour. We also have the so-called magma skin power, which, as you might imagine, might cause Odin to have magma-like skin or a coat in that fashion. Again, it's not clear what this ability could bring to the table, maybe some sort of protection from the attacks, or, as mentioned by Jonathan, it might allow to access specific lava-like areas of the map. Next we have Raven form, which, as the name implies, might involve a transformation into a raven, and again, if this actually ends up in the game, we're going to have to see how this will be different from using Sunin. Maybe it will allow to fly to specific heights and then turn back into Odin's form after reaching them. And lastly, the teleport power, which appears to be an ability connected to the bow, and according to Jonathan, it might be similar to an ability from Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, where you could teleport to the location where you shoot an arrow, especially if you hit an enemy, which looks pretty cool and might also show how years later Assassin's Creed is building up on mechanics from Shadow of Mordor and not the other way around. And that was it for today's video. What do you guys think about all the rumors and leaks shared by all these different sources? Are you interested in testing the new abilities and sets for the Siege of Paris DLC? And what about Expansion 3? What do you think of these powers that Odin might be getting? Are you hyped about them, or would you prefer to avoid the upcoming First Civilization / Mythological content for the game? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.